You're watching the America's Got Talent All Stars interviews with me, Shilah Mae Grace, featuring all star talent throughout all damn seasons of NBC's America's Got Talent. With me tonight is operatic baritone singing sensation Michael Strelo-Smith from season 3 of America's Got Talent. Thank you for being here with us, Mr. Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Also, just for clarification, it was season 2 and 3.
Oh, don't worry. I'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay. Okay, good. I just want to be sure I didn't get very proud of both of the seasons I did.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, you've had more experience than I think many contestants that have ever been on the show.
It was it was definitely an eye-opening experience. I can say that much.
Sure thing. And I see that we have a little friend here.
Oh yeah, this is Ulrika. She
Enrica.
is a miniature. Yes, she's a miniature schnauzer,
Uh-huh.
and of course, not to allow myself to be outdone, she of course came wearing pearls for the interview to this evening. So
Class
she's a lady.
Class A.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, she is absolutely stunning, as I have to say, so thank you so much for bringing her here. Anyway, it is such an honor to have you here tonight on our show, Mr. Michael. Everybody, Michael here is an extremely talented and accomplished singer who's got many performances. You can check them out on AGT. Clips of it and everything are on YouTube. Anyway, as the entire country understood, prior to entering this tournament, you were a music teacher at an elementary school who was obviously heavily involved in expanding theater programs to children. According to the AGT Wikipedia, you were a finalist at the 2003 Classical Productions Voice Competition at Carnegie Hall and was quite active in California's opera scene. So, you have an opera and classical singing background?
Yes, I actually went on what I refer to now as the grand tour of higher education. I studied classical music and opera for a short time at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey, the Boston Conservatory, San Francisco Conservatory, and then began working.
So you had quite a resume, like, built up, like, coming into the show, right?
Yes, yes. The funny thing was that on the very first season, I had a friend who competed as well, and then people were trying to convince me to go and audition for season 2, and I'd never thought about reality television, and at that point there hadn't been any classical singers. There weren't any on season 1 or any other show, and I was sitting at work. I was working for a music school and sitting at my desk, and I saw an ad. Craigslist was great for auditions, and there was something about America's Got Talent looking for singers, and I took the only recording I could find, which was from a karaoke bar singing "If Ever I Would Leave You" from the musical Camelot. And I sent that in with an email that says, "My name is Michael. I'm an American. I've got talent." And that's all I said. And 2 days later, I get a call from a senior casting producer, and that's when the journey began.
Well, I mean, it was obvious that you were most qualified for this talent competition, as you stated. The senior director obviously wanted you on the show, it seemed like.
Yes, yes. In fact, they would ask me to send things to them, and they would say, "Oh, we'll send it using our FedEx number and this," and all of it was a little. I didn't trust it at first. I thought there's no way this is real.
Sure.
This is a joke, and then turns out it wasn't. So I first dealt with one senior casting producer, and then I was connected with a segment producer who sort of handled me throughout my journey of season 2. And it was an unexpected treat, I guess. It was also a very difficult time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I know in season 3 there was a lot of focus on my work as a teacher, but really prior to that, and sort of what created this impetus in returning then was what I did on season 2,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really focusing on being in the thick of a grief journey after losing my grandmother. Sorry, Ulrika's being very difficult right now.
Sure.
All right, she's out of here. It was after losing my grandmother in 2004, and when I was doing the show in 2007, this was really a step forward. Like, I'm going to sort of reclaim my singing life again, because I had all but pretty much resigned to walk away from it. So it was a step to be there.
Yeah.
And to use my talents that way.
Right. So it was kind of like a redemption, almost like re-entering the fray, so to speak.
Yes. Yes. Now, ultimately, what I learned is that grief journey did not see its ending until 2019. So I was really just beginning a big part of my life journey was, and the show was related to that. So, I mean, I'm grateful for having the opportunity, but it was a tough time for me, very tough time. In fact, I watch it now, and even though, I mean, the one thing that people are going to notice, first of all, is that I look very different now than I did on the TV show. And that's because I've lost 411 pounds. And I don't look back at those videos and see that person and the weight, things like that. What I see is I know exactly how much pain I was in from my grief. And so that's always hard to look back at.
But, you know, I mean, it's a tremendous, like, transformation that you've made, you know. Looking back, like, I wouldn't have recognized you, you know, to be honest, looking back at those videos. But, you know, there's growth there.
Yeah, and it's also a really interesting thing to reconcile to at this point in my life, because I had, leading up to, you know, the past few years, I had a wealth of experience and wonderful things that have been photographed of me, and obviously the television show and the pictures from that, the video from that, and I don't look like that person anymore. And so it's I'm really at this sort of regeneration sort of place in my life right now, where it's like, okay, how do I focus on this? Do I look at it as none of this exists, my life doesn't exist anymore? Or is this a chance for me to rebuild and start the life that I wanted to always have?
Right. And, you know, you're the perfect example that it's never too late to make a fresh change, you know, and to find happiness. So that in itself is inspiring already. And speaking about inspiration, throughout your time on AGT, I know many people would probably remember that you were driven largely by a passion to inspire your students, the students that you taught at your elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
I assume, to follow their dreams. So that was a main motivation behind you auditioning for the show again, right, in season 3?
Sort of. You know, the way the show works, and it's not really a big, huge secret, is everything is story driven.
Sure.
If you don't have compelling story, they're not going to do as much with you. In fact, I went back and I found my initial episode from season 2, and what was surprising, I completely forgot, is that I was the very last act of that episode.
Yes,
you
you
were. Sort of like
were.
anchoring thing. I completely forgot about that. And then I thought I was done because I was in the top 35 of season 2.
Yeah.
I was convinced that I was done, and I had a great experience. And then I get a call, and they asked me to come back for season 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was just surprising. And I had conversations with people saying, you know, we want you to come back and sing again. And I did. And of course, the worst part about all of it is I went to, this time we weren't at a television studio, we were at a theater in downtown Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was so proud of my performance of the very first episode of season that I did in season 3, and it never aired.
Yeah, nobody
Because
saw it.
it got preempted by a speech that President Bush was giving at the time,
Oh.
and it was just it's gone. The episode's gone. But it was actually, I think, out of all of the performances that I did on the show, that was absolutely the best performance that I did. Period,
I
of those
believe it.
seasons.
I mean, it was according to all we know from looking at the Wikipedia pages that you performed "Time to Say Goodbye" from Sarah Brightman, I believe. Is that who sung that song?
Yeah, so that sometimes with a duet, Andrea Bocelli
Yeah.
as well.
So I mean, felt like that really would have showcased the operatic side of you, your operatic background.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I walked out and everything just aligned beautifully. And I really had the support of the judges. I had the support of the audience, and just being in the best voice I could be in at that point of my life. It was a great day. It was notably, and I know you'll touch on the judges soon, it was the one and only time that Piers Morgan was actually nice to me.
Is that his real name, by the way, Piers?
Yes.
I've never, okay, as long as I've been alive, heard of anybody who's had that name before, except now that I'm hearing it. But anyway, more like Pure One Imports, right?
Right.
Because, I mean, this is something that I always found pretty weird, was that the show, despite being an American talent competition, half the judges or jurors on the panel were from Britain.
Yeah. And so is actually the majority of the lead people of the production team as well.
Wow.
That were all a part of Mr. Cowell's group that had been producing it, but
Yeah.
most of the executive producers. I mean, there were some that were LA based, but I encountered. There was one from France. There was 2 or 3 other ones from the UK. Even my actual segment producer for season 3 was also from the UK.
Well, so it sounds like most of these people, on the crew, were from a different continent.
Yes.
Well, so if we take a look back at season 2, you performed a jingle called "This Is the Moment," and
Yes.
I, like many of the people there, really enjoyed your performance. Like, really, I mean, it was obvious that the moment that you started singing that you have a huge voice. Like, you sung that in tune and completely a cappella. Like, not everybody can do that. That's talent.
Thank you. I was actually very, very, very nervous about doing that piece of music.
Yeah.
Because I had submitted, they had me, after I sent that initial audio recording, they asked for a video, and I took 2 things I had ready to go. I don't even remember what the second one was, but "This Is the Moment" was one of them. And I had not realized that David Hasselhoff was one of the judges. And then I find out I've actually now got to stand before him and sing this song from the musical Jekyll and Hyde, which he had done.
Oh, I didn't even
had
know
sung
that.
this song. Yeah.
Okay.
And to pretty decent acclaim when he performed that role. So I was terrified. In fact, I was convinced that I was going to be fine with, before I even got before the judges, I was going to be fine with Piers Morgan, I was going to be fine with Sharon Osbourne. I was convinced David Hasselhoff was going to hate me because I was doing this piece of music. And that was not the case at all.
Yeah, it was like the opposite. Because, like, if you remember, David actually gave you props for the difficulty of that piece, and
And the funny thing about that, especially when I watch it, I came home from work one day and I just put the TV on, went into the kitchen to get a bottle of water, and I'm listening, like, what is that on the TV? And I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. And I go rushing out, and I realized that they were using me as part of this commercial. Now, the way it's set up is if you get 3 X's during your performance, you're done. You stop performing.
Right.
And then if you get 2 no's from judges, then you're not moving on. I somehow, in the heat of everything, I combined all of that. So when I got my second X during the performance, I stopped singing. And David Hasselhoff was on his feet, like cheering me on to keep going and keep going. It was all the split second. But what's great about the commercial is it was this drawn out thing, and you hear a heartbeat when I stop singing. Like the drama that they built with it. But
Okay. Yes.
But that was the moment that I really did feel connected with David Hasselhoff. He just was right there and was pretty amazing.
Yeah, because it was pretty apparent to me that the two British imports, okay, it seemed like they were never a fan of yours since the start. I mean, Sharon, hello, darling so-and-so, how are you? Osbourne, okay, literally admitted that she buzzed you because she was bored. And
yeah, she just doesn't like the music that I had been singing. And that's when, of course, you continue to watch that. And I said, Mrs. Osbourne, I hope that you someday have an opportunity to admire me half as much as I admire you. And then she said, you sugar mouth. And that's when I got my nickname of Sugar Mouth. And then she was a little bit more on board. And I will say this. When I was, after the episode we were done filming, I had to go up to do a separate interview. And while I was in this hallway, because they really do keep the judges away from the contestants. Right. I was in this hallway, and the first thing that happens, of course, is Piers Morgan walks by, doesn't acknowledge me, doesn't even look at me. I see Sharon Osbourne, and I just sort of go off into my own little world. I didn't want to be disruptive or anything. And she stopped in front of me and put her hand out, and she said, I really do think you did a beautiful job. And shook my hand. And so, I mean, that was meaningful there. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of it that's all show and what they're trying to do. But okay. I actually did feel a little bit more supported from her than you would necessarily see that they would air in what was aired.
Sure, and thank you for explaining that, because I was really curious as to, how she was off camera, because the impression that I had of her, not just to you, but like to many other acts, was kind of fake, to be honest. I mean, but no, I mean, what was really interesting about your audition was, I don't know if you caught this, but Pure One Imported pretty much implied that he intentionally buzzes acts.
Yeah.
Out of spite, not because they were necessarily bad, just because he felt like it.
Right. In fact, that was one of the few times where he actually complimented me, because he pressed that buzzer and laid into it because he wanted to see me fall apart. And I didn't. I just kept going. And that was, he did compliment me on that. I do have to say that buzzer, though, if you've not actually been in the studio to hear that buzzer, it is just a horrible, horrible sound. It is so loud that you feel it in your bones. So it's really hard to keep working past it. I mean, it's designed to throw you off. And it was just a testament for me at that moment that I'm just going to keep persevering. And again, as I said, that was the one time he did say something nice to me.
I see. So then comes Vegas week or Judgment week or whatever, right? And then you made the top 35. Like they told you that you were in the top 35. So no doubt you were relieved, hearing that for the first time. And then, like later on, several minutes later, they tell you that you got cut.
Yeah. So the way it worked was, and I had a terrible time in Las Vegas season 2. I got very, very sick with like a sort of bronchitis thing. They would do these sort of B-roll shots. They would try to create other storyline and whatnot. And they had us all pile into a very old double-decker bus. And I was with the group of people on the main floor of the bus, which meant we were enclosed. And we were getting exhaust from the bus into the inside of the bus. And so all of a sudden, after a while, it was like building up, and I developed this sort of bronchial spasmic thing, and I almost couldn't sing. And if I haven't seen it in such a long time, but they even had footage of me following me into my hotel room, taking some NyQuil, turning off the lamp, getting into bed, all of that kind of stuff. But the way the numbers sort of worked is at the end of the first episode that I was on in season 2, that put me in the sort of like top, just by showing up, I was in like the top 200. And then I was in the top 70.
Yeah.
And then I was advanced to the top 35, and then I got cut.
Okay. So they do it in multiple stages just to kind of, I assume, heighten the anxiety for the acts.
For many of the acts, it does. It was not something that really had affected me, only because, I've been doing this my whole life, and sometimes you get the gig, sometimes you don't, and that's really how it is.
Right.
And you move on, you go on to the next thing. But there were a lot of people that it was very hard for them. Now, what surprised me was after I had been eliminated, again, if you look at the scope of the number of people that auditioned for the show, which that season was like well over 700,000 people, to be in the top 35, that was a very proud moment for me. I was very pleased with that.
Yeah, hello.
There's nothing to be ashamed of at all. Incidentally, once they eliminate you, I'm ready to just go home, but they won't. They have psychologists sort of following you around to be sure that you are in a healthy space before they release you.
Sure.
Yeah. But, it's like it's just work to me. And I was, okay, time to move on to the next thing.
And I have to commend you, Marco, for having such a great attitude about everything, but you probably don't even know why they even cut you in the first place. I can't figure it out because from what I'm hearing, Sharon is saying what a nice job that you did, and then literally a couple minutes later it's like, oh, we're sorry, dear, you didn't make it. What?
Well, the thing that was really funny is I think it all just is a part of making good TV. I was shocked to see the way people were acting after I was eliminated. There were so many things on the NBC message boards at the time that were in my favor. And another act saying it was just ridiculous that he was eliminated and you took this person and this person. And it created more buzz for the show. I think that's just the intention.
Well,
but at the same time,
I believe you because, that was appearing in season 3, 4, onwards, very much so. So. Yeah. But, oh, sorry. You were going to say something?
No. Go ahead. Continue. No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I just wanted to state that I'm really glad that they, again, provided these psychotherapists for the contestants. Because I felt for you, Mr. Michael. I really did. There was a scene of you where you were showing the jurors a picture of your beloved grandmother and telling them how much she meant to you. I'm sure that was a very heartfelt moment for you. And knowing what we know had happened afterwards, it just seems cruel.
A part of that is just in the editing too.
Right.
There was a significant amount of time that went by between the cuts that happened. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't as on top of each other where it was. They created the emotion with it, but again, it's like me carrying around that photo of my grandmother with me. That was. And I got the airtime for that because it added to the story.
Sure.
And that was one of the things I learned very quickly is that in order to make the most of the opportunity that you have there, besides just performing and to have the visibility, is to make sure that you are committed to the, authentically giving of yourself and the story that you're providing to them, and wanting to share that. And so the more I did that, that's what gave me more visibility and audience support from there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, people can relate to you in that sense. So, come season 3, right? This time you successfully made it past Vegas Week. Which, a side note, do you think that Vegas Week, or whatever silly name equivalents have, since been termed for such a time period, do you think that Vegas Week is tougher than the live shows?
Yes, and here's why. So season 2, when we finished up, they gathered us all up in the studio after the first episode, and so all of us that were moving on to Las Vegas were told that, and then even everything we got, that it was going to be Vegas boot camp, that we were going to get there, we were going to have coachings, we were going to really be put through some artistic paces, and that never happened.
Okay.
It was really nothing more than still showing up and singing our piece, or just presenting your act, and that was that. I mean, there wasn't really a rehearsal other than working with the pianist ones, because now we were able to use live music, or tracks. I think, was it for part of it? Yeah, I was live, and then another one I had a track in Vegas, but because everything had been a cappella earlier in season 2, but it wasn't really anything more than just showing up and performing in another location. But what was a little bit harder about that was the shoot days were very long. Everybody was, gathered. It wasn't, this week there's only this group of people. Everybody was at Planet Hollywood, and we would sit in a ballroom at Planet Hollywood hour upon hour upon hour upon hour. And that's really what can be difficult, is the fatigue sets in a little bit of just, 10, 12 hours of being in this room doing nothing.
Oh, yeah. And at least when you get to these semifinals, you can get votes and support from the public instead of having your verdict solely rendered by the free jurors. So,
well, sort of, which was what sparked more controversy for me in season 3. Because originally,
right, we'll get to that. The judges' choices for that, right, but I'm just generally saying, if you secure enough votes to be in the top 3 or 4 acts, I think that you're just automatically voted through. I mean, there were a number of acts that made it into these semifinals of that year that didn't deserve to, but because they were popular enough with the public, they did. So, anyway, you make the quarterfinals on season 3, and then you performed a song called "I Am What I Am," and
yes,
I immediately, when I heard you, I thought it was a very good musical performance. It was a song that I would see or go to see on Broadway, which made total sense with your theater background and was ideal for your voice. So, needless to say, I was shocked when Pier 1 and Pier 2 imported buzzed you. So, at that moment, what was going through your mind when those X's came?
Well, there was a lot going on at that point. And they were trying to, I think, get me to be a little bit more assertive when it came to, my interactions with other contestants, specifically the other big classical singer that was on, and there was a lot of comparison.
Neil.
And yes, and to be honest, I think it really, when you go back and you really watch the way things were aired, it was more focusing on his weight and my weight, and that was the competitive part of it. And I picked up on that. And that's when I started to kind of like just zone out from the show a little bit. Because I wasn't there to do that or to necessarily tear someone down or be sort of in that way. I was there to advance what I do with my art.
I mean, that's pretty insulting, to be frankly honest. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but at least it seems like society in general has moved forward from that, and where something that might have been acceptable back in the day, or might have gotten past like the green light in that day and age, might not fly in today's standards. So
yeah, I mean, in fact, if you watch the Las Vegas, the section, the last cut before it goes into the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
And they're going back and forth between me and Neil, but they're also showing us walking in slow motion. They're showing us walking up and down really deep staircases. When I saw that, that was a problem for me.
Yeah.
And that sort of like really just sort of, I was much more mindful of everything that was going on once I got to LA again to do the live show. But everything leading up to that when we got to the LA portion, I mean, it was fantastic. There was Style Week, and that's when I got to work with the show's vocal coach, which was really an incredible honor because she's a wonderful composer. Her name is Georgia Stitt, and she's married to Jason Robert Brown, also another big Broadway composer. And I'm still grateful to be connected to her now.
Well, I'm glad to know that there was at least some good things to come out of this show. But knowing what we know now, do you think that they may have deliberately pressed the X's on your performance for the antics of the show? Because, like, it just seems contrived. Like, to me, I mean, it was just complete baloney, to be honest with you. But it just was specific, like almost like a parallel to how your first audition went on season 2.
Well, and really what just at that point, where I just became angry, I was just ready to go home.
Right.
It was the first thing out of Piers Morgan's mouth was about what I was wearing. And I was wearing exactly what the show put on me the day before when I was taken shopping.
Yeah. So you didn't choose your wardrobe.
I mean, I sort of approved the comfort of it and whatnot, but I was wearing what was approved by the show, what they took me, what they made me wear.
Not that it even like matters. I mean, Pure One Imported like always makes a big deal about the way that people dress, and it's almost like a fetish. It's creepy.
Well, and so it was very funny that was, as soon as I heard that out of his mouth, that was sort of when I really was shutting down from the whole thing, because this was all done. There was some other motive behind all of what was going on. I didn't really know what it was. And then, of course, the next thing was over the song choice. And the way it works is you submit a list of songs.
Okay.
And then say what they can get clearance for.
Okay.
And if they can't get clearance for any of your songs, they may make a suggestion. Now, the interesting thing was the song that I did, I Am What I Am, which is from a Broadway musical.
Right.
But it was also covered by Gloria Gaynor as a disco number back in the 1970s. So then once the song got criticized and the performance was criticized, I then start hearing people like, oh, well, why was he doing this Gloria Gaynor disco song? And and then the judges for Piers and for Sharon to rip the song apart. And I thought, okay, I'm singing what they told me to sing. I'm wearing what they told me to wear. And also keep in mind, I was frustrated too with the fact that I had sung the song Somewhere from West Side Story.
Yeah.
And a week later, I think on his first live show, Neil was also singing the same song. And I felt like I was being set up for something, and I'm not sure what it was, but it just wasn't. It wasn't fun. It just wasn't fun.
I agree. I mean, I think that it certainly seemed like they were trying to set you up. The comments from the judges, none of it made a lick of sense. And even my co-stars were like, to Piers when he was spouting all that karaoke baloney, like he was like, did this guy forget to take his medications? That's clearly a Broadway style performance. Genius.
Yeah. So,
yeah. No,
you
I
know,
mean,
it's what the other thing that was very interesting for the live show, you're given a certain amount of tickets for personal people to bring in, and I had some family. I had also I donated an auction for this auction thing that we had at school, a silent auction. An opportunity to come see the show. So there was two of my students and their mothers came, and also my very first voice teacher and her mother, who has worked in the television industry for decades, were there. And after the episode, the live episode, we went back to the hotel and then to go eat, and we were watching the rebroadcast, the West Coast broadcast of it, and they were shocked because they said that the ovation from the audience that you hear in the what aired is not what happened in the studio. They actually had sort of quieted down the applause. They made it look as if like the studio audience was supportive of me, as they actually were. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what I did notice, okay, thankfully, was it was so good seeing like your family obviously rallying behind you. When the judges were up there, kind of trying to pick things apart. I really it was good to see that. So at least I guess the editing wasn't that terrible on that aspect.
Right. That they did show that. It was it was interesting that they did play with the audio enough that I was just surprised.
I have to say this. I think actually that this actually ends up being less in favor for the judges or the jurors. It just makes them look even more inconsistent, like fake, phony hypocrites that they sometimes make themselves out to be. I mean, like Pure One Imports, here he is at the audition saying that you were good enough and that he was going to correct the mistake that they did last season letting you go. And then suddenly now, come around, he's saying that you're not good enough.
Well, and here's also what was very interesting. Season 2, once you were in that first live show, if you were one of the top 5 acts based on America's vote, you automatically moved on to the semifinals.
Right.
All of a sudden, my episode, which was that first one of the live shows, we do it. The next day we go back to do the results show. And they've now said the top 4 acts are going forward. And it will be the judges who decide the next space, and it'll be between the acts that come in 5th and 6th place, but they never told us which place we came in. So I was all of a sudden now with the dance group 6 Step, we didn't know which one of us was in 5th place and which one was in 6th place.
Right.
But now all of a sudden the judges were getting to make that decision where that hadn't existed before. All of a sudden that was this new rule that came about when we went out to do that episode.
That was new with you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, it was automatically, in season 2, it was automatic. The top 5 acts automatically moved on to the semifinals. And then all of a sudden it was the top 4, and then 5 and 6 the judges get to pick. So it created a bit more controversy again.
And I felt like that you were roughly livid, Michael. I mean, to find it ticked me off too, and it wasn't even Pure One imported because I expect that from him, like his backtracking BS that he does, and he does this like in later seasons, not just to you. So, to me, he just never came off as being as sincere as what he might have wanted to, despite how hard he tries to put up this brutally honest front. okay? But it was Sharon, actually. I felt like she was always trying to be everybody's sweet old grandma apple pie. But like when she was up there with you, I felt like she was being very condescending towards you and talking down to you like you were 5 years old. Like at that moment when you were standing there, did it feel like she was trying to belittle you?
Um, I could feel the tension, and I think she was also just trying to get me to maybe get my emotional state in check in some way. But at that point, it was a lost cause, because, as I said, it's like when you walk out there and doing the best that you can,
Right.
and you're wearing the clothes they tell you to wear, you're singing what they tell you to sing, and then those are the first two things that are ripped apart, and you just feel like, oh, this was all a big setup. And so at
Yeah.
that point, I just didn't care, and I was still going to. They could criticize me and tear me down all they wanted to. I was going to stand up for myself because I believed in what I was doing,
Oh,
and I knew
absolutely.
that I was doing things that were better than other people,
Yeah.
and I was going to stand behind that, and I still do to this day.
And the best thing was that David, okay, I mean, I hope this is the case, but it seemed like this entire time he had your back.
David Hasselhoff is one of the most remarkable people that I've ever known, and helped me to find grounding in, and find confidence in that, to work through the show. And I've held on to that because there was never a moment where he was anything less than 150% supportive of me. And I found out that from someone who was on the production assistant, that when they were in these other settings where they would show the judges in a big hotel room looking at all of the headshots of everyone, that no matter what anyone else was saying, even if they weren't filming, David Hasselhoff remained always on my side.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and thank you for confirming it because I was hoping that at least one of these judges wouldn't just be a figurehead. But also one of the best things was that America was supportive of you. I mean, they gave you enough votes to qualify for the judges' choices, which meant that you either got fifth or sixth place, like you were saying. So that means that America obviously disagreed with the judges, or half the judges, I should say, on the panel.
I have to say that, and it's still something that I'm just profoundly affected by, even now, all these years later.
Mm-hmm.
The only negative things I ever experienced as a part of that show really were the comments from Piers Morgan. And there was a gentleman who had a blog for a number of years, and he loved to write about the classical singers. And for a few seasons after mine, every time, because I get these news alerts, anytime there would be a new classical singer on AGT, he would then compare them to me and then go reiterate how much he couldn't stand me. Those are the only two negative things I encountered at all. The response from the public, the emails I got, the just letters that I would receive, and then the show starts airing throughout the world, and I'm getting amazing positive comments from people like all over the place.
Yeah,
It
you
was
should
just,
be. Hmm.
and it was a very profound experience.
For sure.
I was very grateful.
So at that moment when you were going up to the judges' choices, did you have an inkling that the odds might be against you when you found out?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. In fact, I realized that when I was noticing some other little things that they were doing in the studio. I mean, I already felt the tension anyway. And
Yeah.
honestly, I wasn't expecting to move on because I didn't want to.
Right.
I just wanted to go home at that point. And
Sure.
I noticed that when you had guests in the studio with family and whatnot, they were all given wristbands to wear. So then that way they kept those people together. They changed the color of the wristbands, I think, or they didn't give wristbands to some people. So like everybody in my party was either, I think they were without a wristband all of a sudden. But the other people who had wristbands, you knew who was going to be moving on.
Oh.
The other acts, yeah.
So everybody knew going into the results show based on that.
I mean, if they were paying attention,
Okay. I see. But that's not pretty subtle, you know.
And I'm sure that there, you know, people get caught up. There's so much going on anyway.
Sure.
It's just being the observer and that I am. I just like, oh, that's an interesting little detail right there that's missing. And but you know, honestly, I went as far on the show as I was supposed to go. That's how I see it.
Yeah. And
I don't think I was supposed to go any further. I don't think I would have been ready to move further, especially at that point in my life. So this was, it was what I needed at that time.
Sure. I mean, it's, you know, there's nothing much better than a graceful exit, and at least you got that and the support of America behind you. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the funniest thing I have to say is, okay, is that when you were doing the judge's choice, it's fine. You know, Pure One Imported had the nerve to tell you how humility goes a long way. Like, seriously,
yes.
He should suck on that himself, because if anybody needs humility, it's him. And I assume that he never apologized to you off camera, like he just is like that.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Again, like I said earlier, they do make an effort to keep the contestants and the judges separate. But
Sure.
There are going to be moments where you're walking past them. You know, it's like if I was standing somewhere and David Hasselhoff was walking by, he'd always stop and like pat me on the shoulder and like give me some bit of encouragement. Sharon Osbourne would always smile. She would say something. There were 3 specific moments, like twice in the hotel lobby and once in this gift shop. And Piers Morgan made this point to just walk right past me, almost brushing against me, never once looking at me, acknowledging nothing. The man just did not like me.
Well, you know, take solace by the fact that, like, nobody likes him.
Right. Absolutely. And but it's like it's hard to, you know, not be affected by it when it's happening, because you feel like so much of this is in his hands because he's one of the judges, but really it's also the producers who are making the decisions anyway.
Right. And he's just on just to create controversy, most likely.
Right. Where it all balances out and elevates beyond the way he acts is really, again, the way people treated me from all over the country. And people, for a long time, people would I'd run into people and they'd come up to me and talk to me about it. And it was always so supportive, especially in a time of my life that was very difficult. And I wouldn't necessarily say I went into all of that with a whole bunch of confidence anyway, with self-image, all of those sort of things. So the fact that the feedback from the country was, and then the world was really amazing. In fact, I got, during season 3, I got fan mail from a group in Indonesia and a group in Oslo that they would assemble to watch my episodes. They were my little fan club. So all of that so far outweighs the nonsense I had to deal with Piers Morgan.
So that made it all worth it, I
Yeah.
assume. Yeah, so here's a question I have for you. So let's not talk about the jurors anymore, because, you know, they're has-beens anyway. I'm kidding with David. I mean, you know, David's always been, I know he was only on for a few seasons of America's Got Talent, but, you know, he always seemed like a cool guy to me. So having your affirmation really, you know, that was nice to know how he really is.
And I think he's, you know, there's a certain caricature aspect of David Hasselhoff, because outside of what he does in the US, here he was this like sort of icon of like 80s popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes off in Germany. He's this big, huge musical success in Germany as a pop star. So it just, this caricature is created. And really what I walked away with is a really kind person. He's just a nice guy.
Yeah. Down to earth, right?
And so was Jerry Springer, I have to say, because he was our host those 2 seasons. And Jerry Springer, very nice man.
I was just gonna ask you that, actually. So you beat me to it. You must be psychic, I swear.
And he's very kind. I'm one of those genuine and kind people I've ever met in my life.
Well, I mean, it does seem that way, I mean, I find it odd that he's hosting, the things that he does on this show, but, I think that's the contrast that makes it interesting and keeps people watching, but he is, deep down, a very well-educated person, and when I saw him on your season, it did look like he genuinely was supportive of all the acts,
Yeah.
So.
He really was.
Yeah, so just a couple more questions about AGT. Did you make any friends with any of the other acts in the season?
I was friendly with other acts, but in terms of, long-term connections, there's one person I still talk to occasionally. It's a comedian named Granny Pearl. We've stayed in contact over the years. Otherwise, I really haven't stayed connected with anyone from the show because, even though we were sitting in a ballroom for hours upon hours upon hours, and I wasn't trying to be antisocial. I'm just very introverted anyway in that sort of situation. And in my mind, I'm there. That's work. I've got this job to do, and I don't want to be distracted by talking all day with people and then having to go sing. And I just sort of stuck to myself.
Well, no, I understand. I mean, it's a highly competitive environment, It's like at that moment, everybody was probably focused on just getting through to the next round.
You would think that, but it becomes very, very social backstage.
Really?
Very social.
Okay.
And
you mean in the live shows?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah, the way everybody's just sort of gathered in the back and in the holding rooms.
Okay.
And I really just, throughout the whole process, just sort of stuck to myself. And, you kind of start to feel like you're not a part of the group, but it's a balance. Like I didn't necessarily need to go and be there to be a part of the group because I was just trying to get my own life together as a performer. So.
Yeah. So if it wasn't gonna be you, okay, who would you be rooting for, or who were you rooting for to win the whole thing?
Oh goodness, I don't even remember who all of the final people were. I don't even think I watched the finale.
So the people in the finale were Queen Emily.
It would have been Queen Emily.
Queen Emily.
Yeah.
Donald Braswell.
She was one of the. Well, that's right. Oh, that's right. They brought Donald back. I forgot about that. Yeah.
But anyway, Queen Emily.
But Queen Emily, she was someone that I actually had one of the few people that I would sit down and just have like good collegial sort of conversations with about what we're going through performance-wise. She was telling me how she's managed to, at that point, how she was able to produce albums for herself to get them recorded. And this was before things like Patreon and a lot of these other social apps. It was really just a matter of a GoFundMe type of thing. And she would then say, okay, if you do this, I'll give you this album. And so that's how she was doing it. But she was really a remarkable performer. And just, and I loved listening to and just experiencing her in that live setting. So I might have put my support behind her, absolutely. But I did forget that they brought Donald back, and Donald's very talented. And so I'm happy that they were able to bring him back and he was able to get that success.
Well, I mean, he is a very talented person, and the other thing is, the greatest thing was that he made it all the way to the finals, right? A wild card of
Hmm.
all things, and that basically stuck to the judges that they were wrong. So I mean, it was a moment for sure. Seeing, I guess that's why they called him the comeback kid for the season.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to believe that it was all done in this sort of very genuine way. Because if you go back to season 2, um, there were no wild card sort of things. It was, they add elements to the show when they can
Yeah, just to spice things up a
to
little bit.
to spice things up, to add to the ratings part of it. And I was very happy for Donald that that was something that worked in his favor. That was really
Right.
wonderful for him.
I think the reason why they even had a wild card, because they only had one space open up. I remember that they had like 8 other acts that were vying for the spot in the live shows, and America was voting for them. Which, strangely enough, the same thing happened again this year. The latest season of America's Got Talent, like they just had 4 acts, and the public was going to vote for one of them to come back as a wild card. So this was something that
Mm.
happened in season 3, but I think the reason why it even happened in the first place was because the Russian bar trio had to withdraw from the competition because of an injury. So they had an open spot.
Hmm.
So maybe it was fate, maybe it was adjustments. Let's just put it that way. But either way, I'm glad that Donald got his chance to shine in that. You know.
Absolutely.
So, lastly, knowing how things turned out eventually, did you think that you would have fared better on season 2 or 3?
To be honest, they really are almost like 2 different chunks of my life, that even though they were back to back
Hmm.
seasons, and the way that I've reconciled everything, and I try to do that most of my life, is this is what I was supposed to do at that moment. There's no need to go into hindsight and wonder what I could have done differently, because everything happened because it was supposed to happen. And I did what I was supposed to do at that moment and moved on to the next part of my destiny. And then so on.
It's a really good way to look at things, I have to say. So,
And it's something that's taken a long time to get there, to embrace that way of thinking, but it is what I truly believe and stand behind.
right. Well,
And to be honest, I'm glad that I didn't make it any further. I the it's I don't think so. But season 2, the winner was Terry Fator.
yes.
Terry Fator, phenomenal talent,
Right.
no question about it. And what happened is he was already booked prior to doing the show. He was already booked to work for a smaller property in Vegas,
Oh.
to take his show.
Uh-huh.
Then he wins the show.
Yeah.
That property, which is a part of a bigger organization, then says, oh, well, let's capitalize on this. Let's put him on the Strip. So that's how he gets this big Vegas show on the Strip. It had nothing to do with negotiations from the show necessarily.
Like,
When we went
and,
back for
yeah.
I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say it was just like an augmentation, like
Right.
a boost. Yeah.
And so then on season 3, they start announcing that there's going to be a Vegas show. Every single contestant there was convinced that they were going to get the same thing that Terry Fator got, that they were going to get residency at a main Strip hotel, casino. And I was sort of like, that's not going to happen. No property's going to do that. And of course that isn't what happened. I mean, they never, the show in Vegas was, I want to say it was about 10 days after the finale, and it was at the MGM. And from what I'm told is it was mostly empty there, because they couldn't sell tickets fast enough because they couldn't get the publicity going enough. So the big Vegas show that I ever got was one night only at the MGM Grand, and that was that.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's honestly a bit of a letdown, but you know what? I can believe it because if you look at the, really small fine print at the end of the episode, the credits, like you'll notice that it says that the $1 million prize that they keep touting, right, is going to be paid to the winner in installments over 40 years.
Right. So that's hysterical. And that was the other thing. The first time when I was eliminated from season 2, and I have the psychologist following me around. I mean, literally following me around, like trying to escape this person because I just want to go home.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, and I said, it's what I said to you. Sometimes you get the gig, sometimes you don't get the gig. And he said, well, it's for $1 million. I said, well, not really, because, I mean, whenever you see annuities that are offered as prizes. So, for example, Wheel of Fortune has always had, like forever, like a $100,000 annuity, $20,000 annuity.
Yeah.
It's always paid over 20 years.
Yes.
Always.
Always.
And all of a sudden, I look through the contract and I see that this $1 million prize is paid out over 40 years, which I think works out to about like $12,000 or $13,000 a year that you get over the 40 years.
After taxes?
Yeah, all of that. So that's why most people take the cash value of it, which is around $300,000.
Oh, okay. I see. I didn't know that they had the cash value.
Yes, so you could take the cash value of it, which that initial investment is the that $300,000, which most people are taking, and that's that. Because otherwise, when you're paid out every year over 40 years, you become sort of the world's poorest millionaire.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not making a difference.
I mean, that's if you even live that long. I mean, you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, hell, they were probably hoping that some senior citizen was going to win the show. You know what I mean? But
right.
That's fascinating. That is real fascinating right there.
So actually, just to put it in perspective, if you look at the 40 years and the $1 million, I just wanted to get not even taking into account taxes.
Yeah.
But that just divides into $25,000 a year for 40 years. Yeah. So you're still having to work. It's not as if like it's this life-changing thing
that they make it seem to be. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, is that even enough to live off rent?
Well, not here in the San Francisco Bay Area,
and not in today's time period either, probably.
Yeah.
So,
but the other things, like with that, the contract is very interesting that you sign, and all of a sudden, every time you make it to a new level of the show, they hand another stack of documents for you to sign. So it was over 1,000 pages for season 3 alone of contract stuff, and they start saying things like they control your image in the universe, like just to be sure that there's no question about it, that they got you.
And I'm sure there's probably some non-disclosure agreements in there too, at least for a temporary binding.
Yeah, like temporary things, which is usually like a separate document. But it was really, once you're eliminated from the show in particular, I mean, you would think you would be done, but you're also limited, actually, I think it was for the next 18 months after I was eliminated. If the show wanted to, they could take a portion of anything that I earned performing.
No way. Really?
Because they gave me the free publicity of being on television.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, they're skilled at what they do, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's very interesting that it lists in the contract, and this is what throws a lot of people off when they're competing, is they talk about recording contracts.
Yeah.
And the options for that. And it says that second place gets a recording contract if they decide they want to record you. So there's a lot of false hope with it, but I think, you just got to go into it with a sense of realism too, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that the biggest reward on going into any of these shows is that initial public exposure. I mean, if you just take a look at YouTube, like every season, the first performance, the audition videos, are usually the most viewed videos.
Yeah, and here we are. It is, what year are we in? Was that 2022? And I was on 2007 and 2008. And I still will hear positive things from people. I'm able to use the show in my materials still for publicity, and it's always a positive piece to my performing life.
And that is wonderful, Mr. Michael. I'm glad you were able to walk away with something that's lasting. Speaking about post-AGT work, what have you been up to since the show? Have you been producing any original plays or material?
Well, I have work that I'm doing now, but before we leave AGT altogether, it's worth noting too that the experience phenomenal, and the people I did encounter throughout were wonderful, and it was very sad to see that Neil Boyd is no longer with us.
Yes.
He had passed away, and I do wish that they had given him some better opportunities and recorded better things with him.
Absolutely. I mean, he was a real talent too, so he definitely deserved better.
But so since the show, I actually moved to Las Vegas for a while. I taught, came back to California, did some more teaching, and then one day woke up. It was actually my sort of like a pivot moment when I turned 40, and that's when sort of life really changed, and I went back to school. I finally finished my degree and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Musical Performance with a Religious Studies minor, and then I stayed on and earned a Master of Fine Arts degree, and then started this weight loss journey, lost 411 pounds.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And throughout this process, overcame the grief and loss that I had been dealing with ultimately for 15 years. And I have seen, there was a video of a performance. I went to Europe and I participated in a program for 5.5 weeks in southern Germany that focused on romantic German art songs. So it was like a gift to myself to just shut down my life, to go to Germany and to do nothing for 5.5 weeks but sing German art songs. And it was the most beautiful experience. And I watched the video of my final performance, and I can see where everything changes for me, where I actually find hope again in through like the grief I'd gone through. Yeah. And it's just been great, sort of like reclaiming this part of myself and growing from it. And the biggest thing now is, I had actually been working for a community music school here in the Bay Area, and they contracted me out to a major tech company that everybody is familiar with. And that tech company, I taught private voice lessons there for 4 years. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, what's going to happen? How am I going to perform now? And wasn't thinking too much about it. And a few months ago, an organization that we have here in the Bay Area called Theater Bay Area, they host these general auditions. And normally you would go in, you'd sing for, or do a monologue for 100 different companies, and hope you get a bite and somebody wants to audition you. Mm-hmm. And now it's by video. I made the video, sent it off, completely forgot about it. And then I get an email from a company north of San Francisco, and I will start rehearsal on Tuesday for the role of the MC in the musical Cabaret.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. It's a brand new challenge, and as prior to losing weight, I wouldn't have been cast in the role. That's just the reality. So this is really it feels like a turning point of getting to really go and be on stage and not only give the best of myself, but be the best version of myself.
Oh, I'm sure, and I'm so happy that, you're getting all these opportunities now. Sometimes the best things in life, they come a little bit later, but it'll happen eventually.
It gets greater later.
Yes. So, do you still keep in contact with your former students? Because, I know you took a lot of pride in your work with them, even on the show.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. When I began working in elementary schools and building these programs, it was never my intention to try to find some kid that was going to be the next big thing and to elevate them. And it was really understanding what it's like to live a life as a performing artist and to know the struggles that we have, especially when you don't always feel like you have the support from audiences or the public at large. So my goal became to instill a love and respect for the arts, even for people that are not going to ever perform. Some of these kids are going to grow up and they're going to be the ones writing the checks to keep the companies afloat, things like that.
Right.
But what was shocking, and in fact, I always think of like this one little boy, the very first musical I directed at this elementary school when I first started doing that, it was called Bugs. It was about a bunch of bugs at a picnic. Mm-hmm. And this boy had one line, and he came out dressed in all white, and he just screams at the top of his lungs, "I'm a maggot." And that was his big line. He was in second grade, and then I find out he's senior of high school. He's playing Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird in his high school play.
Wow.
So I've heard all of these stories about these kids that continued on performing, and that was really incredible and touching.
I think it's the joy of kind of helping kids discover the creativity and then the artistry within themselves, and then to kind of inspire them to find happiness, in developing that.
Right. And even as I've grown in my own journey, my teaching that I do now, it's all private voice teaching, and I have all my students are adults, and sure. I'm not really working with kids as much anymore. But what I'm finding with adults is the things I found within myself that, if our goal is to be able to be the most authentic version of ourselves, to really put ourselves out there, to show people who we are, that also means we have to tap into this vulnerability. And the only
sure.
way we can do that is through creativity.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I do now. My goal is I don't even see myself sometimes as a voice teacher. I think of myself more as like a creativity coach. I just happen to use the medium of a voice lesson to help get that.
Just know that you're doing great things, and I'm completely in support and in awe of what you do.
Well, thank you.
I think it's a very valuable thing. And to be honest, we need more people like yourself to inspire people to find that happiness in creativity and art.
It's all there. We all have it. I even say, when I talk about singing in general, everybody focuses on how, it's this difficult, hard thing to do. And really, is the way I see it, the production of sound is the easiest part of singing. Yeah. Because it's not as if I have two separate mechanisms here. It's the same thing I talk with. It's just we all talk and sing. It's the same thing. The hard part is the interpretation, the text, the movement, all of those other pieces. But in terms of making sound and being able to express with that sound, everybody can do that. And everybody can.
And the more so, everybody has their own story too, and that's one of the best things about singing, to me.
Absolutely.
So, if people want to see, you, or to see your new shows, or to keep up with you, how and where can they find you, Michael?
Well, my website is in the process of development right now, but it is www.mss, my initials, mssvoice.com. And there is a little bit of information there. It's under construction, but there's a place you can just send me a message, or you can email me. It's michael@mssvoice.com. And always happy to answer an email and support someone else along the way.
Yeah, and I will post this information too in the description box below, so everybody can have access to it too, and up on the screen too. Yeah.
Great.
My editing people will take care of that for me, because I don't know anything about technology, as you can probably tell before going into this this interview. Well, thank you, Mr. Marco, for such a fun and enlightening interview. It was a pleasure for me to learn about all the things that you're doing and all the wisdom that you've accumulated since the show.
Well, and I thank you for inviting me to do this interview. It really was an honor to get to talk about it and continue to share that part of my life and how it's helped me to grow in the rest of my life. So thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It really is. We really should totally collaborate on something fun down the road. Like maybe you can even teach me how to unlock my soprano-ness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So anyway, this is Shilah Mae Grace, and remember to go follow Michael on all of them's socials, because he's super awesome, as you can tell, and he's a real talent with a real heart.
Thank you.
Well, until next time, goodbye.